The other thing that that historians really like to do is we like to compare. We compare the heck out of everything. Historians love to compare because it shows uniqueness. It shows cause and effect. And because it shows cause and effect, it describes or articulates change and continuity. And it also allows us to think about what I mentioned earlier, these patterns, right? It helps us establish patterns. So in one component of comparison, right, or comparison works in two ways, just like context, right, works in two ways. We can compare different presidential debates, right? I have here 1960 to 2020. And one of the big sort of talking points or contextual points of the 1960 debate between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon, first of all, there were 4 nationally televised debates. And one component that stuck out in these televised debates was the physical presence and youthfulness of John F. Kennedy. And that mattered to a lot of people. And there is analysis that suggests people who listened to these debates on the radio suggested Nixon had the better hand, but those who saw them suggested that Kennedy was the winner. In fact, of course, Kennedy, won the presidency that year. And the major topics, it's 1960, so you might well imagine they are discussing the Cold War. They're discussing communism and the threat of communism in the Soviet Union, in China, and in Cuba. And I could really digress on this, but I'll shut the historian's mouth and like keep it straight here. So all of that said, 2020, we've had 3 scheduled debates. One of has been canceled. They are televised, they're on the radio, but now, of course, the context and the public sphere has enlarged to include the internet. And these are questions that we want to ask ourselves. What does physical presence matter when we're viewing the two candidates? What they look like, how they present themselves. It seemed to matter in 1960. Is it something to think about? What are the major topics? Are we discussing communism in the Cold War, or are we discussing COVID, right? Or you could even be like, you know what? When in 1960, they were discussing communism in the context of the Soviet Union and Russia and China, and you could make the sort of pattern or the comparison, and we're like, oh, it's interesting in 2020 when we're thinking about like foreign policy, we're not talking about communism, but who do we still think about or talk about? Russia and China. Okay, so that's sort of a comparison that would establish a pattern of the importance of both China and Russia to the United States presidential debates in the United States more generally in 1960 to 2020. Okay, so that's sort of important, and you could do this with anything, right? The sort of the presidential debate between Clinton and George H.W. Bush in 1992, and then to 2000 with George H. Bush's son, George W. Bush, of course, and Al Gore. So that's one comparative sort of effect when you're comparing it across time. But then again, right, it also gives us a chance. I don't know if I. I don't know if it was a typo on the slide, but we also get a chance to compare the policies, right, and the candidates, right, and it's sort of to these last points. It enables us, the viewers, to compare the policy views and perspectives on the nation. So here are the for tomorrow's debate. The categories are fighting COVID, race in America, climate change, national security, American families, and leadership. And also for tomorrow's debate and the recent debate, how many people are in this room, Allie, right now? Are there?
There are 8.
There are 8 people. There, I like to say in my classes, there are 8 people in this party. All right, it's like 8 people in the party. So the major issues that the nation is facing are the following, and I want you to answer in your mind yes or no if you agree with the following. And then I also want you to think about what each presidential candidate view in relation to these issues are. Do you agree, yes or no, with a public health insurance option? You know, this is all to yourself. Do you agree or disagree with candidate Biden's $2 trillion climate plan? Do you agree or disagree with a national mask mandate? Do you agree or disagree with the Affordable Care Act? Do you agree or disagree with raising the corporate tax rate? Do you agree or disagree with fracking? So this is the effect of the debate, because it challenges us to consider the issues and the relative positions of each candidate and our own. So we compare the candidates, whether that's their physical, physical presence, which is, it is what it is, but it's there. But hopefully, more importantly, their views and policy issues and perspectives. So then, again, so y'all feeling like historians now. It's pretty easy to be a historian. You contextualize, you compare, and then you offer analysis, right? So all analysis is breaking down a complex idea like a national mask mandate or the Affordable Care Act into smaller parts to better understand it. And you're going to do this by weighing what you've learned through the antecedents of contextualization and comparison. Okay, so the analysis, of course, lends to interpretation, which is which is your job, the historian's job, to give your own view based on what you've known or what you've studied and what you've committed to this knowledge through contextualizing and comparing. Okay, so that said, I also like to consider this. Actually, it's it's 2:30. I did not expect to be speaking this long for this long. All right, is everybody okay, or does anybody have any questions?
I don't see any questions in the chat yet. If I missed one, let me know, you guys.
Okay. And Allie, I don't know how you think about this, because I could probably talk for another 15 minutes. What I do in my lectures is I break them up like the recordings. So it's not like a 60-minute recording. It would be like, so we could stop the recording and then start the recording again, and it could be broken up. I don't know how you want to do that. It could be more digestible for those who are going to watch it later. I do in part one.
Oh, yeah. I can definitely do that when I edit it afterwards.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Yeah, very good. Yeah. Okay. So good. So doesn't seem like there's any questions. Are there still 8 people in the party?
No attrition yet.
No attrition.
Yeah, still 8 people. You're good.
Zach,
Okay.
Zach, I have a question.
Go ahead.
So as a historian, how do you think these debates will be viewed? Because it's so different than before with social media, where, I remember watching a debate, even probably with Obama and Romney, and not being on my phone looking at, okay, what are they, what are other political commentators saying? And that was only just a few years ago. And it's so different in how we digest information from, and I don't know if, as an historian, I don't know what you think in terms of how these debates moving forward will look, since
Yeah,
you know,
I think that's a great question, and I think that what we started to talk about that, it's the context of has changed so much, right? In terms of this in terms of modes of communication, largely the internet, and not just the internet, but how many people are using the internet, who's using the internet, where they're using the internet. So I think, Anthony, it gives us a larger sort of critical view of how we consume information in general, right? I mean, it's like, 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 where are you taking your phone and checking? You're like, just because. So that, and I have to also think too, a contextual point is, again, through comparison, is the personality, of course, of the current president, right, is very unique, and that's, again, when you compare the debates. I'm not unique in saying this. We've never experienced a president, like our current one, both in his sort of personality and also, in his political experience, right? He had never held a political office, so you have to think about that. And as a historian, I don't think this isn't setting. I don't think this is necessarily setting the precedent. I don't think all the future debates, presidential debates, will be this wild or will be attached to our phones this much. As a historian, I am very aware that things change. They're inevitable. They're gonna change. So I would hold, like, sort of be in sort of despair about that. So that. And the other thing, I think I read, this isn't my idea, but I've read this among many of the other things I've read, that the current president essentially had, made lots and lots of people who had never been interested in government very, very political. And because they had never been interested in government, there is a lack of knowledge about civics, about government, about legislation, and now it's just it's just sort of like that. So I don't. So again, this is why, Anthony, I think it's a very, very great question, and I think that's why we're here, and that's why we're historians, so we can compare, we can consider, and then we could also, like, sort of take a breath and be like, it's not always going to be like this, and it doesn't always have to be like this. So that would be my best answer to that. Is that square for you? Yep. Okay.